A pleasant good evening to everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's lecture, A History of West Indies Cricket, a Gender Perspective. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Miss Margaret Broomes. I just met her, so hi. This is the sixth lecture of the 2018 lecture series, Fire in Babylon, Cricket and Popular Culture, which is being hosted by the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, the University of West Indies Department of History and Philosophy, and the National Cultural Foundation. Last month was Women's History Month, so I think this lecture is timely. Women have been champions in their own right in sports in the Caribbean and across the globe, whether it has been in track and field, basketball, tennis, swimming, cricket, or any other sport. Women's talent, athletic skills, and achievements have been showcased at international competitions, from the Olympics, World Championships, Commonwealth Games, FIFA World Cup, and of course, Women's Cricket World Cup. But due to gender inequality and misogyny, at the professional level, women are questioned about if they're good enough or exciting enough to attract viable contracts, salaries, and media exposure. They're also questioned if they're good enough to secure top-notch training facilities and financial support in order to become successful athletes. Some have even questioned women's presence in professional sports. In this day and age, we need to disregard such antiquated thinking. Instead, we need to commit time, money, and resources, both publicly and privately, to ensure that girls and women continue to get the training and the support they need to advance and succeed in sports. Let us be champions of girls and women in sports. So I think tonight's lecture is very important because Ms. Broomes is going to kind of contextualize how women have fit in the sport of cricket. Just a little bit about Ms. Broomes. She's a librarian by profession. After leaving the Alexandra School, she became a Student of the Year at the Barbados Community College in the Liberal Arts Division, completing her first degree at the University of the West Indies at Mona. She then acquired a master's degree in history with the option of heritage studies at the UWI Cave Hill campus, where she's now in the process of attaining her PhD in history. Ms. Broomes is a member of the Barbados Cricket Association, and she served as the member of the now defunct Barbados Cricket Association Women's Committee for a number of years. In 2006, she was hired by the University of West Indies to develop a cricket library. Her knowledge in this area has led to the flourishing of the CLR James Cricket Research Center. This is now the only well-developed cricket library in the West Indies, with a collection that spans the 1800s to the present. Ms. Broomes has notable publications for Harvard University, published by Oxford Press, featuring outstanding former West Indies cricketers. For the past few years, she's been writing on the journey and challenges of women's cricket in the West Indies. This is expected to be the first completed publication on a very important topic. Ms. Broomes has interviewed most of the stalwarts of the West Indies women's cricket, of both past and present. Based on her expertise in this area, it's my pleasure to welcome her to discuss A History of West Indies Cricket, a Gender Perspective. Ms. Broomes.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Crawford, for your introduction. I wish also to thank the Museum and Historical Society for inviting me to participate in this lecture series. And I thank you all for coming out and listening to me. My topic this evening History of West Indies Cricket, a Gender Perspective. I'm sure you are familiar with the men's side of West Indies cricket, but there's the women's side which needs to be told if we are to have a complete history of West Indies cricket. The literature about West Indies cricket is about men. The authors of West Indies cricket are men. The sports journalists are men. And so men have written about themselves and their activities and their experiences, leaving women invisible in the historiography of West Indies cricket. Women made a contribution to West Indies cricket, and that contribution should be recognized and recorded in the history of West Indies cricket. Well, I've taken a gender perspective on West Indies cricket. When I speak of gender, it is not only about women, but it is also about men. It is about how women have experienced cricket in relation to how men have experienced it. Then we see a particular picture emerging for women that is completely different from that of men. I'll take a step back to around the middle of the 19th century to place women in context so that you have an idea as to why the women's game has developed in the manner that it has. Okay. Cricket was introduced throughout the British Empire by British immigrants wherever they went. From as early as the 18th century, the armed forces had begun the dissemination of the sport, and by the mid-19th century, cricket had been firmly entrenched in the West Indian Islands. Cricket was reflective of much of what was taking place in Britain at the time, and had become organized and sophisticated, and was played by the aristocracy and the upper middle classes. Cricket was the sport of the wealthy and the educated. It was the gentleman's game which embodied the British virtues of strength, persistence, courage, healthy rivalries, camaraderie, and sportsmanship. The game implied wealth, exclusivity, good physical form, high standards of honor, loyalty, and morality were also expected from its players. Cricket was seen as critical to the development of manliness. As a team sport, was viewed as an avenue for developing masculinity. As Aveston Downs, Barbadian historian, articulated, the field of play provided an ideal opportunity for boys to learn leadership skills, build stamina, and to be courageous and vigilant. But most importantly, cricket would prepare boys for the masculine task of defending the British Empire or in administration of the empire. Cricket was a yardstick for masculinity, and for these reasons, cricket was promoted as unsuited to women who were viewed as inferior to men based on their biological makeup. The West Indian 19th century society was a patriarchal society where men dominated and made decisions concerning women's lives. The white upper middle class woman's place was in the home. She was required to be beautiful and to take care of her husband and raise their children. She was viewed as physically and mentally weaker than men, and this idea of physical inferiority became idealized and was as the natural state of women. As a result, strenuous physical activity was discouraged, as it was believed that women could damage their reproductive organs. This had a profound effect on women playing competitive sport, as they were seen as defective women. White women participated in sports which emphasized poise and grace, such as swimming, tennis, and golf, that focus on her femininity. These views left white women powerless to participate in cricket whether or not they wanted to. They were relegated to being colorful spectators at matches, supporting their brothers, husbands, and sons. This was indeed surprising since the English women had been forming clubs and playing exhibition matches since the 1890s. And West Indian women would have known about this from relatives and friends in England. Yet, cricket did not develop as a competitive sport for white women in the West Indies, as they did not challenge the view that cricket was a masculine sport and not appropriate for women and girls. Black women who were at the bottom of the social ladder had a much different experience from their privileged white upper-class women. Black women were playing cricket amongst themselves in their villages and communities, bowling and batting with their menfolk, daughters, brothers, and sons, for just as long as black men had been playing. West Indian cricket icon Larry Constantine recalled this phenomenon in his book, Cricket and I, and confirmed that cricket was a family affair, and I quote, "Often my mother kept wicket, and in those days my sister was as hard to get out as any of the younger group. Clearly, black women and girls were playing cricket and playing it well." The first evidence of competitive cricket was found in the 1940s, where black women from Barbados and Trinidad got organized and played a test match. Oral history has corroborated this activity, that the women's match was played in 1945 in Trinidad, where the legendary Iris Walker and batting partner Ellarine Oliver were the star batters for Barbados, with Iris becoming the first woman to score a century for Barbados. This attempt at competitive cricket was short-lived, as the 1940s was not the right time for women. There was much racism and classism within the West Indies team, as those whites in the team believed that it was their right to captain the West Indies men's team instead of black men who were more deserving of the captaincy. Black men had to overcome these challenges before women could consider becoming organized and playing competitive cricket. White women had shown no interest in playing competitive cricket. Organized women's cricket in the West Indies emerged during the second half of the 20th century as a black working class phenomenon in the throes of the independence movements of the 1960s. Frank Worrell, a black man, had reached the highest pinnacle of the sport by leading the West Indies men's team for the first time in West Indies cricket history. West Indian islands were gaining independence from Britain and were in the process of developing a national identity that was not British. It was at this juncture that, along with calypso cricket, music, dance, stick licking, that women's cricket was included as popular culture. However, this was not to suggest that women's cricket was accepted by the male cricketing fraternity. It was not. Cricket was a masculine sport. As former Jamaican Prime Minister Michael Manley pointed out, nothing, and I'm quoting, "nothing infuriates a true cricket fan than the suggestion that cricket is a sissy sport. There was to be nothing effeminate associated with cricket." In 1965, a Jamaican colored businesswoman, Monica Taylor, took the initiative and got in contact with women from across the island who were interested in playing cricket, to play friendly matches against each other on Sunday afternoons. These casual games thrilled many males who watched the game, including Johnny Wong Sam, a cricketer and umpire who encouraged the ladies to organize their game and play competitive cricket. Wong Sam facilitated the meeting, and the outcome was the formation of the Jamaica's Women's Cricket Association on the 26th of October 1966. The first president of the Women's Cricket Association was Monica Taylor. This was a significant event in the social history of West Indies cricket culture, as women for the first time were playing with a measure of professionalism instead of women's cricket being left as a casual sport for recreation played in cart roads, backyards, and gullies of the islands. Initially, 6 teams were involved, carrying the names Lucas, Diamonds, Canada Dry, Kingston and St. Andrew Council, Kilowatts and Waterville. These teams competed for a trophy donated by the Chinese Athletic Club. The women's games were a huge success, as hundreds of men flocked to see the women in action. Women competing against other women was a novelty, as the games were seen more as a spectacle than the perceived serious game that men played. By February 1967, Monica Taylor had arranged for Jamaica to tour Trinidad. This tour was an incentive for the Trinidadian team to form a Women's Cricket Association, and the Trinidad and Tobago Women's Cricket Association was formed during the same year. The first president of the Trinidad and Tobago Women's Cricket Association was Sonny Murray, secretary of Queen's Park Cricket Club, a well-known Trinidadian men's cricket administrator. Trinidad started with 10 clubs, 6 in the north and 4 in the south. League and knockout competitions were played, with the winners playing off to become island champions. In 1968, Monica Taylor became a member of the International Women's Cricket Council, with a view to playing cricket at the international level. By this time, other clubs had sprung up in Jamaica, bearing the names such as Newberry, Raelettes, Jamaica Fire Brigade, Civil Servants, Browns Hardware, Higginstown, and Melbourne Cricket Club, which was a men's club but included a women's team. Teams such as Browns Hardware and Lucas were sponsored by community businesses, which provided all the necessary equipment in exchange for having their names attached to a team. In Barbados, cricket had been part of the curriculum of some elite girls' schools, such as St. Michael's and Queen's College. Both schools had a girls' team in 1953. However, cricket ceased for the girls after they left school, as there were no avenues for the continuation of the sport until the late 1960s, when a group of Barbadian women began to organize themselves for serious cricket competition. In 1967, a group of ladies from the parish of St. Michael got together and formed the first women's cricket club called Rivals Ladies Club. The team practiced at Weymouth and at YMPC in St. Michael. Subsequently, other teams were formed, such as the Starlighters from the parish of St. James, Rovers from Christchurch, Casual Ladies Club from St. Michael, and Leeds, also from St. Michael. In 1968, the Barbados National Women's Cricket Association was formed to provide an organizational structure to chart the way forward for women's cricket in Barbados. Movell Beard, founder member of Rivals Ladies Club, became the first president of the association. The following year, in 1969, a dark shadow was cast on women's cricket when a rift developed among players, dividing the organization, and another association was formed called the Barbados Women's Cricket Association. Gwyneth Squires was the president of that association. Gwyneth Squires are band leader, right? The Barbados National Women's Cricket Association was supported by government and was recognized as the National Association. However, the ladies from the Barbados Women's Cricket Association were allowed to participate when there was a round robin for a national team. Most of the team practiced at Weymouth and was coached by Courtney Selman, Andrew Campbell, George Broomes, and Collis Keane. The Starlighters practiced at St. John the Baptist playing field, which was located in Holders Hill, St. James. In January 1970, the English team visited Jamaica and was led by Rachel Heho, the English captain. Again, Monica Taylor captained this Jamaican team. As pointed out by historian Hilary Beckles, the first test was played at Sabina Park and was attended by some 6,000 spectators by the second day. Jamaica played well despite their lack of experience in international cricket. The great show put on by the Jamaican players led Rachel Heo to come to the conclusion that the West Indian women had the same inborn ability as their male counterparts. She particularly made reference to the impressive spin bowling and batting of Vivian Latty Scott and Angela Brown, the pace bowling of Peggy Fairweather and Grace Williams, and the batting strength of cover drive specialists Evelyn Bogle and Yolande Geddes. England, being the more experienced team, was expected to win the series. However, all 3 tests were drawn. The following year, in 1971, the English team visited Jamaica for another test encounter and also played in a triangular tournament in Trinidad for the Jack Harewood Trophy. This contest was won by Trinidad. The standard of West Indies women's cricket was rising and had reached the standard of cricket being played by the international players, as Jamaican and Trinidadian players gave a good account of themselves against the more experienced English players. 2 years later, in 1973, Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Jamaica, joined the International Women's Cricket Council in order to participate in the first ever Women's World Cup to be staged at Lord's Cricket Ground in London, scheduled to be played 20th June 1973. This was 2 years before men staged a World Cup in 1975. Trinidad placed 5th with Jamaica in 6th place. The declared favorites to enter the finals of the World Cup were England and Australia. England succeeded in defeating Australia in the final at Edgbaston. Although Jamaica and Trinidad were not highly rated, this was a significant achievement for the West Indies women cricketers and administrators. With Jamaica and Trinidad participating at the international level, the time had come for greater regional participation and hence the formation of a West Indies team to represent the region at the international level. Barbados became a member of the International Women's Cricket Council in 1973, and that same year there were 8 women's cricket clubs functioning in the island, operating under the 2 bodies, the Barbados Women's Cricket Association and the National Women's Cricket Association. Also in 1973, Grenada got their first encounter with organized cricket when they invited Barbados for a contest. Grenada won 4 out of 5 games and introduced their first domestic competition with 18 teams registered for the competition. By November 1973, as a means of spreading women's cricket throughout the region, the first ever Caribbean double wicket competition was organized and played at Kensington Oval and Carlton Cricket Club in Barbados. There were 5 participating countries: Jamaica, Guyana, St. Lucia, Trinidad, excluding Tobago, and Barbados. The situation, as it were, in the West Indies was that Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago were playing at the international level as separate teams. This was not ideal, as they were not strong enough as separate teams to win an international competition. It was decided that there should be a united team representing the West Indies. This meant that it would be necessary to put in place a regional competition so that a wider selection could be made to represent the West Indies. In October 1975, the Caribbean Women's Cricket Federation was formed to oversee women's cricket in the West Indies. The first officers of the Caribbean Women's Cricket Federation were Monica Taylor from Jamaica, President Movell Beard, first vice from Barbados, Teresa Nash, second vice president from Grenada, and Jean Carmino, secretary treasurer, and she was from Trinidad and Tobago. These ladies laid the foundation for the success of the association. Monica Taylor served as president until 1982. The establishment of the Caribbean Women's Cricket Federation meant that there was now a body in place to grow and promote women's cricket in the West Indies, and would be responsible for choosing a team from among the island's players to represent the West Indies. In 1976, the name of the organization was changed to the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation, with the selection of the first West Indies women's cricket team. The selectors of the team were Courtney Selman of Barbados, and Courtney Selman is sitting right over there. Mr. Huntley Alston of Jamaica, and Sonny Murray of Trinidad and Tobago. 16 players were selected to form the West Indies team. There were 5 players from Barbados: Gloria Gale, opening bat and reserve wicketkeeper; Cheryl Bailey, frontline bat, leg spinner; Jeanette Mitchell, all-rounder; Angela Harris, right arm, slow medium off break bowler, left-hand bat; Patricia Whitaker, vice captain, all-rounder, medium fast bowler. There were 5 players from Jamaica: Dorothy Hobson, leg spinner, medium order bat; Grace Williams, pace bowler, middle order bat; Peggy Fairweather, pace bowler, middle order bat; Vivian Lattiscott, all-rounder; Yola Hall, wicket-keeper bat. There were 5 players from Trinidad: Beverly Brown, middle order bat, medium pacer; Louise Brown, captain, opening bat; Jasmine Sammy, opening bat; Nora St. Rose, pace bowler; Menota Tika, all-rounder. There was only 1 player from Grenada, Joan Alexander, a wicket-keeper bat, and she was 15 years old at the time. The 1970s brought significant growth and development in and signaled the formation of cricket teams throughout the islands. The West Indies women's cricket team played 11 test matches between 1976 and 1979. In 1976, they played matches against Australia, India, and against England in 1979. By the 1980s, women's cricket had reached its lowest ebb and came to a halt mainly due to lack of funds. The West Indies Cricket Board had offered no assistance and completely ignored the women's game. It took the West Indies women a hiatus of 24 years from the game before they resumed Test cricket in 2003 when they played against Pakistan. It is significant to note that in spite of these challenges, the West Indies women had done very well for themselves without any assistance from the West Indies Cricket Board. Despite all these achievements, West Indies women's cricket was plagued by negative attitudes from the residual perception that cricket is a man's game. As a result, a great deal of hostility had been expressed by the male cricketing fraternity. Very often, that overworked term, "it isn't cricket," with all its negative connotations, was attributed to women's cricket. Women who were good game players were ridiculed for their efforts and were labeled tomboy and lesbians, and this translated to much of the challenges the women faced, especially in attracting sponsors. It also contributed to the low turnout of spectators to watch their games. Financial challenges have been a significant issue for West Indies Women's Cricket Federation. For every major tournament, the women had to seek financial assistance through their own efforts so that tournaments could be staged. The accolade of being selected to represent the West Indies brought with it significant financial implications for the players. Many players worked tirelessly to raise funds in order to meet their ambitions of touring with the West Indies team, and others had to take unpaid leave from their jobs in order to tour. Additionally, Women had to practice mainly after working hours during the week, as time away from work was never forthcoming and matches could only be played on Sundays when the men were not using the pitches. Hosting cricket tours was even more problematic for the West Indies women's cricket. Finance remained an ongoing issue for the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation, with players and members forced to support the federation by paying membership fees and injecting personal funds, which were supplemented by minor sponsorship and even smaller grants. West Indies Women's Cricket had not secured sponsorship for women's cricket. As a result of these challenges, the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation was unable to pay staff to assist with management of women's cricket, and the organization was forced to be run by volunteers. Stemming from a lack of funding was a lack of exposure to playing international teams. Players had the potential to perform at a much higher level if they had the necessary exposure and appropriate conditions. Unavailability of playing fields was a major problem. The playing fields belonged to the men, and women could only access the fields when the men were not playing. The women had to use less than top quality facilities and found it difficult to secure the best grounds for matches. Women had to pay for the preparation of pitches if they wanted to use them, and in many cases had to use unqualified persons whom they thought knew cricket rules to umpire at the local level matches. This did not bode well for adequate preparation and development of players. Media coverage was another area of concern for West Indies women's cricketers, as this had been manifest in the paucity of information found in the media when compared to the men's game. Coverage during women's matches had been largely limited to results of games, with television coverage being given very little viewing time. Pre-competition publicity was inadequate and to some extent was responsible for the low turnout of spectators at women's matches. The old cricket clubs in the West Indies promoted gender discrimination against women. These clubs, founded in the last decade of the 19th century, except Georgetown Cricket Club, founded in 1858, excluded women as members, even though the women may have been wives of club members. The Pickwick Club in Barbados allowed women as members in the 1980s. However, it was not until the new millennium that forward-thinking presidents like Willie Rodriguez from the Queen's Park Cricket Club in Trinidad and Alva Anderson of the Kingston Cricket Club in Jamaica moved a motion to allow women to become members of the respective clubs. In 2004, Queen's Park eventually opened its doors to women, and so did Kingston Cricket Club in 2008. West Indies Cricket Board's acceptance of women's cricket had been the most telling for the women's cricket administrators. The West Indies Cricket Board, with a history of overseeing cricket development, had lent very little support to the West Indies women's cricket administrators in the development of women's cricket. It was expected that the male cricketing fraternity, with better finances and facilities, would have assisted the women in the promotion of their cricket. However, this was not the case, as the progress they made thus far was solely testimony to their dedication and hard work, which was ignored by the male cricketing fraternity. In a letter dated September 2001 from the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation to the West Indies Cricket Board, seeking assistance for an upcoming tour to Pakistan and Sri Lanka, it was pointed out that the Federation had received assistance from the West Indies Cricket Board on 2 occasions only, for the World Cup in 1997 and for the Lancashire tour to the West Indies in 2001. Clearly, the West Indies Cricket Board was not in the habit of assisting with the development of women's cricket. However, the West Indies Cricket Board, under the leadership of Wes Hall, responded by approving in the 2001-2002 budget the amount of US dollars 125,000, and I quote, for institutional strengthening and support for women's cricket program the following year. This was a small breakthrough for women's cricket in the West Indies. In 2003, the International Cricket Council, which is the international governing body of cricket for males, recognized the slow development of women's cricket, not only in the West Indies, but worldwide, and mandated that men and women's cricket should be integrated under one umbrella body of the International Cricket Council to help manage and develop women's cricket. The merger between the International Cricket Council and the International Women's Cricket Council was now in vogue, and the West Indies Cricket Board had no option but to merge with the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation, whether or not they wanted to, if they were to remain a member of the International Cricket Council. The West Indies Women's Cricket Federation viewed the idea of the merger with the West Indies Cricket Board as necessary for the survival of their game, since they lack funding and sponsorship for the promotion and development of women's cricket. In an interview with a former West Indies Cricket Board operations manager, he pointed out that the West Indies women's cricket was a liability to the West Indies Cricket Board, as there were no gains to be had from merging with the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation. The women did not have a sponsor, and neither were there any financial gains to be had from gate receipts, as cricket fans did not support women's cricket. Therefore, when the International Cricket Council mandated all male and female cricketing organizations to merge, it was expected that there would be some resistance on the part of the West Indies Cricket Board, not only from a financial standpoint, but also because the historical legacy of gender and class traditions that had impinged the development of women's cricket in the past were still very much entrenched in West Indies cricket. Minutes of the meeting of the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation and the West Indies Cricket Board, dated 16th January 2004, indicated that the West Indies Cricket Board met with the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation to discuss the merger. This was a meeting of historical significance and was deemed a red-letter day in the history of these two organizations, as they had never before sat together for any discussion with regard to women's cricket. In August 2004, the West Indies Cricket Board engaged the services of Ernst & Young Caribbean to assess the current state of the women's game in the Caribbean and to make recommendations concerning the merger. Ernst & Young recommended that the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation be made a member of the West Indies Cricket Board. This recommendation was rejected by the West Indies Cricket Board. The International Women's Cricket Council and the International Cricket Council became officially integrated under the umbrella of the International Cricket Council after the 8th Women's World Cup in South Africa in April 2005. The International Cricket Council was now officially the sole body responsible for women's cricket worldwide. This meant that all women's and men's organizations worldwide now fell under the auspices of the men's organizations in individual territories. The West Indies Cricket Board was no exception, and from April 2005, they were officially recognized by the International Cricket Council as having responsibility for West Indies women's cricket. In reality, the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation no longer existed as an organization but fell under the aegis of the West Indies Cricket Board. The West Indies Women's Cricket Federation envisaged this as an opportunity for support in the growth and development of women's cricket in the region. This was indeed a misconstrued idea. Foremost on the West Indies Cricket Board's agenda was to disband the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation. In June 2005, the West Indies Cricket Board set up an integration steering committee comprising 2 members of the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation and 3 members from the West Indies Cricket Board, who would now oversee the way forward for women's cricket. The steering committee proposed that a cricket committee for women be established, and this suggestion was accepted by the West Indies Cricket Board. The Cricket Committee for Women would replace the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation and would oversee women's cricket under the auspices of the West Indies Cricket Board. Herein lays the problem. As the integration process dragged on, the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation expressed grave concerns regards the dissolution of their organization and the setting up of a women's cricket committee to oversee women's cricket in the region. In a letter dated 21st November 2005 from the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation to the West Indies Cricket Board, it was stated, and I'm quote, "A reputable organization such as the West Indies Cricket Board cannot accept that the constitution of another body of more than 30 years of existence should be totally ignored to the point that it has been signed off on as being dead and buried." Clearly, the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation had registered their disgust regarding the dissolution of their organization. In 2006, the West Indies Cricket Board was no closer to integration than it was in 2003, when the International Cricket Council first called for the integration of men's and women's cricket. The West Indies Cricket Board was one of the last to comply. All ICC members, with the exception of India, Pakistan, and the West Indies, all ICC members, with the exception of India, Pakistan, and the West Indies, had already merged. Minutes of a meeting convened by the West Indies Cricket Board, dated 4th February 2006, confirmed that the relationship between the West Indies Cricket Board and the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation had deteriorated since the start of the integration process. The meeting concluded with the West Indies Cricket Board putting the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation back in place to run women's cricket as it had done before, and I quote, "with administrative and financial arrangements remaining the same." In fact, the West Indies Cricket Board had disbanded the Women's Cricket Committee it had put in place to run women's cricket, reinstated the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation with no financial support from the West Indies Cricket Board. The merger between the West Indies Cricket Board and the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation had now come full circle, with the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation again responsible for women's cricket, which was in direct contravention of the ICC's mandate. The West Indies Women's Cricket Federation was now left in a quandary to fend for themselves as they had done before the merger. In other words, the West Indies Cricket Board had taken a standoffish position with the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation. The West Indies Women's Cricket Federation was now in a much worse off position than it was before the merger. They were now without a parent body, and no financial support, as the subvention of $100,000 which they had received since 2003 had been discontinued since 2005, when the West Indies Cricket Board was mandated to take responsibility for women's cricket. In 2007, an article in the Voice newspaper in St. Lucia entitled West Indies Cricket Board Killing Women's Cricket, Dr. Michael C. Prasad, former Chief Development Officer of the West Indies Cricket Board, under whose portfolio women's cricket fell, had this to say, and I quote, "The West Indies Cricket Board had fallen short of the mandate to integrate women's cricket. It is doing very little. Without the much-needed funding and organizational support from the board, the once strong women's game would flounder. It is already dying on its knees. It is a bleak situation. Under the ICC mandate, each board must look after the women's game in its own country, but the West Indies Cricket Board has largely ignored the players since it took over in 2005. The West Indies Cricket Board must shed its old boys club image. We cannot continue to treat our women with this kind of disrespect." The West Indies Cricket Board had never embraced West Indies Women's Cricket Federation into the cricketing fraternity and only related to them in cap-in-hand situations. The West Indies Cricket Board evaded the merger with the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation for as long as it could, because having responsibility for women's cricket meant an additional cost to the West Indies Cricket Board, as the women did not have a sponsor and neither were they bringing in any money to the West Indies Cricket Board, because women's cricket was not a sport with a large fan base. In spite of the West Indies Cricket Board's apparent lack of interest in women's cricket, there were some professional cricketers and cricket enthusiasts who reached out to assist the women, but generally there was a lack of interest in women's cricket. The contributions of former West Indies male cricket players such as Clive Lloyd, Viv Richards, Michael Holding, Gordon Greenidge, Gus Logie, media personnel in St. Lucia, and individual territorial boards did play a role in helping to develop the game. These contributions, though notably below the obvious needs, helped in maintaining a tournament schedule, annual meetings, and international exposure. Unfortunately, support seemed to have come after cap-in-hand approaches and the accompanying embarrassments which were forced upon the women players. It must also be noted that women do not support women's cricket in the same way they go out in their numbers to support the men's game. In 2008, under the leadership of President Julian Hunt, the West Indies Cricket Board finally dissolved the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation after much resistance from the women, thereby taking complete control of women's cricket. It had taken the West Indies Cricket Board 5 years, from 2003, when the ICC first called for its members to integrate, until 2008, to finally accept responsibility for women's cricket. There was no merging of the two organizations, but a takeover of women's cricket by the West Indies Cricket Board. Rather than making the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation a member of the West Indies Cricket Board, as was suggested in the Ernst & Young report, thereby giving them voice on the West Indies Cricket Board, they were ignored and their organization dissolved. The West Indies Women's Cricket Federation wanted a presence on the West Indies Cricket Board where they would have a voice in setting the agenda for the development of women's cricket. This was a sad time for West Indies Women's Cricket Federation, as it was revealed from personal interviews how heartbroken the women were at the demise of the West Indies Women's Cricket Federation, an organization they had worked so hard to build. The once strong Women's Cricket Federation, which had taken women's cricket from the village, backyards, and gullies to regional and international arena, was now unceremoniously placed in the annals of West Indies women's cricket history. Since the West Indies Cricket Board accepted responsibility for the women, they have played in the 2009 World Cup and the ICC World 2020. They were semi-finalists in the ICC World 2020 and 2010 and placed first in the ICC Women's Cricket Challenge in 2010. However, West Indies women's cricket is still not viewed in the same light as men's cricket and is very much unequal to the men's game, as cricket in the West Indies is still viewed as a man's game. Women's cricket is run separate and apart from men's cricket. Cricket is not seen as West Indies cricket with a women's and men's team, but two separate games. More recently, the West Indies teams have reached amazing success at all levels during the recent World Tournament in 2016 and brought great joy and excitement to the Caribbean people. Surely the structures and programs put in place have certainly helped the women. There is a need to continue to build and improve on these structures. Media coverage for the ladies has improved to the extent that there was adequate live coverage of the women's games in the international tournaments. Cricket fans worldwide were able to see and enjoy the keen competition. There was coverage in both electronic and print media. Although the stands for the ladies' games were only partially full and not to the capacity of the men's games, the attention given was significant. Women came out in their numbers to support and watch the games. This had been far different from in previous years where the stands for the women's game had bordered on being empty. It could be that the standard of the game has risen, but certainly fans were given the opportunity to realize that women's cricket is a serious sport played by talented ladies. There's a need to keep this momentum going for the ladies. Both men and women could be heard praising both teams and speaking of the great performances realized in the keenly contested games. The women are now seen as heroes, and as a result, young girls may be more inclined to choose cricket as their sport of choice. We cannot underestimate the importance of the notion of stardom in sport. Performances of veterans such as Captain Stephanie Taylor, Deandra Dottin, and Hayley Matthews had been outstanding. Women's cricket in the West Indies has indeed come a long way from its early development in the 1960s and 70s, and is certainly a force to be reckoned with. The ladies have played against the more advanced teams of England, New Zealand, and Australia, and have beaten them all and have earned their first ever world title. This was history in the making. It is accepted that spectator support and sponsorship will be greater for the men's game, but greater attempts must be made to close the wide disparity. The victorious 2020 men's team received a winning purse in excess of $1.2 million, while the women received $250,000. This shows the men's purse being 6 times more than that of women. The need for financial security and professional development is equally there for men and women. There should be greater equality between both genders. The players have done their part. It is now for the West Indies Cricket Board to do their part in ensuring that this is West Indies cricket and not men's cricket and women's cricket. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you for a really insightful lecture. I learned a lot. And I think your work contributes to Barbadian history, Caribbean history, and women's history, because you took us on a trajectory or a journey from looking at how Black men and women use sport or cricket as a mode of cultural resistance, right? Mm-hmm. And then you talk to us about the resiliency of women, Black, Barbadian, Grenadian, Jamaican, Trinidadian women, moving past just a kind of a game and wanting to develop a sport, and through their own initiative. The latter part, you showed us that moving from game to sport in terms of institutionalization is a little bit more difficult in terms of some of the systemic barriers that might exist in terms of how we perceive women in sport, in terms of women's gender division of labor within their households, in terms of capital financing, in terms of marketing the sport. So I'm really, really happy that you presented this, and certainly I look forward to the defense, because Margaret is finishing off, and this is a very important contribution. As I said, to Barbadian history, Caribbean history, and also women's history. So we have some time just to take some questions, comments, and certainly, Margaret, you'll entertain just for some minutes your colleagues, friends who may have some questions about your research. Anyone?
Yes, good night. Me as usual. Thanks. It was quite refreshing to hear a talk about women's cricket delivered by a woman, because I was kind of I didn't know who was going to give it, so I thought maybe a man would come and talk about women's cricket. That's how it goes usually. But I noticed your emphasis on the lack of support, financial support for the women's game. I would like to say a few words about not the cricket as a business, but the business in cricket. Because I believe if Black businesses were encouraged to flourish, then Black business could support cricket, and not necessarily women's cricket, but it could support cricket. But let's talk about women's cricket. Your public relations, I feel your women who you say, I've heard the talk to about the women are tomboys and lesbians and so on. If there was a public relations situation where the ladies could go out clothed by our local designers and be presented as ladies, and not just women cricketers, but ladies of our society, then I think it would do a great deal to lift their prestige, not the game, but their prestige. And I think that should be pursued. The designers then will have Black business, because people go out and buy these beautiful dresses on these beautiful Black women. So that's how it goes. Let's take Haley Matthews. How come
so that's one comment.
Okay.
Question, so
Yeah.
can,
Okay.
Yeah. I think Margaret wants
On
to respond.
you see, Barbados, the West Indian society needs to get past the image of how the women look on the field and look at the ability that the women have. There's one thing. And, the women are very good players. We need to stop comparing the women to men, because the women are playing their own game. They're playing against women. They're not playing against men. So when we see women on the field, they're playing their game, and they need to be commended for that, and not just for how they look. They need to be comfortable. Maybe they feel they're comfortable in the wear that they're wearing.
Well, you have to go with how the society perceives, and the society love to see beautiful women. Well, we'll get past it, but right now, that's the way we have to get the money. Now, to go on, Haley Matthews. Now, this young lady, a very personal person, beautiful young lady, and at the top of her game, she gets attention. Why we can't use or promote Haley Matthews? I want to use promote because that sounds better than use. Why can't we promote Haley Matthews in the same way that we promote Rihanna?
I guess.
And bring attention to the ladies' game. All right, and my last thing is the year. At the end of the year, why can't we have a gala with the West Indies Cricket Board members? You know, just have a gala, everybody comes to a dance, dressed in their finest, and the money can support the game. And go to the West Indies Cricket Board and they could have their little ramen, you know, thing. I feel good. Thank you very much.
That was very good.
I just want to once more commend you for being a champion for women's cricket here in Barbados and indeed the West Indies. We have a lot to learn from what was said here tonight and the history of women's cricket throughout the years. And women have always struggled, you know, politics, voting, you know, women's cricket, and they have been very resilient. So I'm going to walk away from here tonight, you know, very inspired with what the women have done and inspired me over the years, because I was there from the foundation here in Barbados, and I would like to also include, and I'm sure you probably will research this gentleman called Mr. Headley. He made a significant contribution to the beginning of the genesis of cricket here in Barbados. So I just want to make a comment. I don't think I have a question as such.
Well, thank you.
So I just want to say that. And also, we had a game here in Barbados between Trinidad and Barbados, and not because she's my sister, but Janet Selman, she made a century during that game, and I think we won that when all the Broomes from Trinidad came here, and we had more people at YMPC than the West Indies Cricket Board of Control having our Kensington Oval. I want to thank you.
Margaret, thank you so much for a rather insightful lecture and pointing out what is in fact the systematic structure of patriarchy leading to the almost, on one instance, demise of the West Indies Cricket Federation, but at the same time an almost arrest in the development of women's cricket in the West Indies. I know that at the end you pointed out some way forward. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on what you think can be done to ensure that the women's game receives equity with the men's game going forward?
Well, there isn't much I can say about that, because that depends on the West Indies Cricket Board and how they perceive women's cricket. The men are bringing the money. They're the ones who are sponsored. The women are not sponsored. So, as I've said, you know, the women it seems as though the women is a liability to the West Indies Cricket Board.
But the women are playing better cricket than the men.
Yeah, they are, but they're not recognized for their efforts. They only see the men. The women were trying to be sponsored for their cricket now for years, and up to now, women's cricket does not have a sponsor even to this day. So, you know, in the same way that Digicel and formal cable and wireless sponsor the men, the women up to today cannot get a sponsor. So maybe you know, we could wonder what would be the reason for something like that. That women West Indian women cannot get a sponsor. I would think that men today still think that it is a man's game, that cricket is a man's game. All the sponsors are men. So, you know, in a subtle kind of way, we're trying to keep the women out. So they're not sponsoring them, but they're not coming forward and saying that, but they're using the old boys network to, you know, to keep them out of the the game. And also one of the ladies told me that they believe that they were not being sponsored because it was a class issue. They say that because the women's cricket is really a working class sport, or it started as a working class sport, that was one of the reasons why the sponsors were not sponsoring them, because they never had anyone to speak out on their behalf. You know, they were poor working class girls, so nobody were speaking out on their behalf so that they could get a sponsor. So
Certainly, yeah, and that's a very good question, because we're talking about women's cricket in Barbados, but we could be talking about women's basketball, women's
Yes,
soccer,
the same
women's
thing.
football, women's hockey elsewhere. And I think the gentlemen who are talking about promotion, we need to show the value of women's game, right?
Yes.
We have different sort of positionalities in sports, and we need to show the value and also look beyond just our region in terms of the sponsorship, which I think is very important. And also in terms of the different levels of the schools, from elementary to secondary to university. We look at what Jamaica has done with their track and field in terms of their programming, certainly larger market, but I think that certainly based on the comments, we need to recapture the resilience that the women actually had in moving the sport forward, and see where we can go with it, right? I know that certainly the structural inequalities are there. They're always going to be there, and people's misperceptions about women in sports, but I think we really need to sort of rally
because
behind it.
even at this time, girls do not play cricket in elementary school, in primary school. The boys play cricket in secondary school. It's the same thing. I was speaking to a principal, and he told me that 75% of the school's budget goes on cricket for boys, not girls. But if they include girls, it would mean more money, and they have to leave some for other sports. So the boys get 75, the girls don't get to play.
So it's definitely tied to, in terms of competition, tied to the market, and we're dealing with that overall in terms of looking at women and in sports. When you think of what the Venus sisters did for tennis, in terms of equalizing the purse, in terms of them getting the same purse as the men, that was showing that they can compete at a high level. Their product is attractive in the sense of the game itself. And now, in terms of look at the Grand Slams, we have men and women getting close to the similar purse. So it's very, I think, aside from you discussing cricket, the overall discussion of women
Still pretty much the same. Yeah.
So we have a question, comment?
Well,
Question? Yeah.
When I stood up first, I wanted to respond to a point that was made, which I really think is absolutely significant, and I didn't want it to be lost. Throughout the lecture, we talked about the cricket starting in the Caribbean, the poor black women are moving up. Cricket started in the West Indies with the high-class white men are moving down. Lots of people in Barbados have been saying for years now, the cricket decline, men's cricket decline started when white people started to know the cricket. When they had the strong Pickwick and Wanderers and stuff, we got the sponsorship following them. Now that it is not so strong, like I said last time I was here for the last lecture, Empire Cricket Club is probably the only club that survived the test of time in throughout thing. And so they now, BCA now have to go to lotteries and stuff like that to get sponsorship. So I think that point that was made in terms of the direction, one is coming down, the other is going up, and that's somewhere in there. And after I was standing here, another point was made. We just discussed a little bit there, that women's cricket is not being played in primary schools, and to be honest with you, it's not being played in secondary schools either. I remember when I was deputy principal across the road here at St. Michael's School, myself and Roddy Eswick tried to develop a thing between Common Mare and St. Michael's, and that didn't last very long. And all of those things must be addressed through legislation. It must be a policy position of the ministry. If we want to get something done, we can't just say go to let the principals, they say, have a policy position, working association with the Barbados Cricket Association. We have lots of female coaches now. We have quite a few women cricketers who have the coaching qualification. It's not rocket science. Put together, let's say, Sally, 5 teams. Assign 2 let schools. There are about 20 or so schools. Blend them and have 2 coaches for each grouping. It's amazing how much you can get from that. You can see every year at least about 5 or 6 cricketers coming through. Because I think we are struggling at this point. Because if we go back, this is 2018, go back to 2014, the cricketers who are playing for Barbados and female are the same. We are not seeing any new blood coming through. We've got to be careful of that.
Any other questions, comments?
Hi, Margaret. I just want to commend the work that Margaret's done, because I think the very rich trajectory of women's cricket in the West Indies and especially in Barbados would be still in the shadows if it was not for the work that Margaret has done for the past, how many years now? Well, and she is doing this for most of the part by herself and for her own passion. And she has collected stories, testimonies, and history, and she has organized that to her best understanding. And I know about cricket that has a ball and a bat, and that's sometimes people run. I don't know why. But she taught me a lot about the history of those women. She taught me a lot about the past century. And of course, she works as a librarian, but it's more than that. She is making those women visible. And she is raising the question beyond whatever you think about what your sexual role should be or what the society expects. She wants those women to be respected as players, and she wants this game to be respected as another sport. So I want to congratulate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Ignatius Marshall. And I hate to regurgitate some of the things that Jeff had said, but I think we should look at the total form of cricket in Barbados, and especially the women. Firstly, I think the structure needs to be looked at. Like how we have boys from under 13 to under 19, which is from the primary school to the high school. Competitive cricket is played, nothing so with the ladies. Secondly is the marketing of the ladies' cricket. Now, we can always say a lot of things come with the marketing, but marketing means dollars coming in which the ladies can then be more or less progress as far as the game is concerned. If you look at cricket and look at the companies in Barbados that benefit from cricket, how many of them return money to cricket? Like all other international sports, if you want to come into the various stadiums, whether it's in India, England, United States, wherever, and you do not participate in the marketing of cricket by selling your goods and services inside the stadium, which you want to benefit from, you have to contribute to the cricket in order to have your goods and services displayed there. Not so in Barbados, or even in the wider Caribbean. And then the business people make a noise, you're shutting them out, but they don't give back for what they get here. We can say what we like about the West Indies Cricket Board or the Barbados Cricket Association, but compare Barbados' structure of cricket to all the other islands in the Caribbean and see the difference. From most of the other Caribbean islands does not have a structured cricket like what Barbados has. The other thing that we have to look at is how many in our schools participate in ladies cricket. We bother with the boys, none with the girls. how do you expect to develop them when they get 18, 19 to become Barbados cricketers? You know, it's just like learning me to walk at 18 years old. So those are some of the things that we have to seriously look at in order to get Barbados cricket, ladies cricket, on a better footing. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I'd like to ask a question here. Ms. Broomes, could you tell me if hotels contribute anything to cricket?
Only in St. Lucia I've heard of that. Women, some hotels sponsor the ladies to, you know, where they could keep functions to raise money. That is the only thing I know of about hotels giving the ladies anything. In St. Lucia in particular, they are allowed to use the Wyndham Hotel to raise funds for women's cricket. But I don't know of any other hotels that help. Haven't come across any evidence of that.
Okay, let's give Margaret. This was really an informative lecture, and I look forward to the completed thesis. And certainly, as our audience have supported what you've presented, we need to do a lot more in terms of looking at how we can develop girls and women in cricket and also in relation to the promotion. I'd like to thank our organizers once again, the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, University of West Indies Department of History and Philosophy, and the National Cultural Foundation. I'd like to thank you, the audience, taking time out to come to this lecture. I know Margaret was concerned at first. We were just seeing a few bodies, but certainly in talking about women and gender in cricket, we see the sort of the full picture of the trajectory of the history of cricket in Barbados and in the Caribbean, so it's important. I would like to also invite you to the next lecture. We're going to have on May 8th, Professor Alan Cobley, and he's going to be looking at cricket and the apartheid, I think it's era, yes. So that one should be really interesting, looking at not only colonization, racism, and the white supremacist system of apartheid or past apartheid, but certainly to continue on our theme in looking at cricket in multiple forms. We'd like to invite you to some light refreshments at the back, and also take an opportunity to take a look at the exhibit in the foyer. We also have a Think Cricket suggestion box, so I think that it'd be nice to get your feedback on some of your ideas in maybe improving the series or anything else that you might be interested in. So I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight. I'd like to thank Margaret, and travel safely. Thank you.